Because these data centers are not just about tracking and tracing you and running a flock camera. They're about the tokenization of all assets on the planet in a digitized format. You got to think with all that digital credit score and track and trace and everything China does, they're doing it with about, let's just round it up and say 500 data centers. And that's for China's behemoth track and trace camera, 1,000 million billion credit scores, instantaneous camera and everything to track everything in real time, everything. That's China, 500. We're going to build 3,500 just in America. All right, so that tells me that we're still trying to retain and control something far greater than just knowing where you're driving your car. So is this SpaceX IPO tagged into all this extra money and liquidity and everything that's going to pull the whole market up? Because as this thing goes up, everything is going to rise with it for months, it looks like. So is this the starting point of a new thing where huge amount of endless money printing will come in because we got all these people out of work that are going to need stimulus checks and basic income again? And it just seems like we're right at that COVID era where people are understanding that we don't have enough money around the place to provide for everybody's needs. So we're going to have to turn the money printers back on again. And it seems like this is the perfect time to do it. Everything's kind of aligning. If you're looking at planets aligning in the skies, this seems to be an economic planet lining sort of month or two that's ahead of us, because all things are meant to push this. If truly they're going to now put all the data centers above our heads in orbit, this is the guy that's going to do it. And all that trillions that was going into the ground-based terrestrial ones, everybody's fighting now, don't take our water, don't take our land, don't take our farmland. This is going to work if the data centers are going to be above our heads. But then that will be outside of human control, where even if you have a problem with it, there's no way to destroy it. It will be outside of literal human intervention at that point.
In Argentina
moves to legalize all non-human corporations run by AI.
So now when we're talking about investing, now you're going to have to start thinking about, do you invest in the future of human ran companies or AI ran companies? And then who runs the AI, right? All of this is happening down in Argentina, by the way, where the guy from Palantir just moved and took his family to go hide. He's also in negotiations buying up water rights. And then if you remember, the Bushes notoriously bought up all the water rights to Argentina a long time ago, basically all the groundwater rights to tap the aquifers there. And right here where I live, the data centers are not seemingly going to happen. And the reason I say that is because A, people don't like it, and there's just zero water. Right now, the Rio Grande is bone dry. There's nothing. You can walk around out there and go look for buried treasure right in the sand. There's no water at all. Going down towards El Paso or Las Cruces, right in the area where they want to place these giant data centers around in my neck of the woods. But keep in mind that the data centers are not the only major investment in the Southwest here. There's also massive detention centers being built. And when I say massive, I mean 400,000 people in big facilities stretching all over the city area of El Paso, Las Cruces, which, by the way, might be America's first megalopolis, which would be like 100 miles straight of urban development, stores, retail, factories, etc., all in a row down the interstate. That would be I-25. And this is the same corridor in which everyone farms in New Mexico because of the Rio Grande. So right now there's a giant fight over a bone dry river and who's going to have the water rights. And that just all aligns with the hike and the prices for everything. How do we drive prices even higher in 2026 and 2027? How do we gain even more profits?
Sassafras throwing us here, 10 pounds of potatoes went up $3 this week from 5 to 8. There's no inflation. No, of course not. It was only at 4.2, percent. They just admitted that it's 4.2 now, not 2 point something. Put that whole subset of what Ransom was talking about for all the genres of people over there as A. But on the backside here, all those people that are pushing all the puzzle pieces around, 73 miles off the coast of Antarctica, and water's so clean they're virtually untouched by human pollution, lives a tiny organism that researchers believe may be one of the most powerful anti-inflammatory nutrients ever discovered. It's called krill. If you've been taking fish oil for heart, joint, or memory support, there's something you need to know. Research shows fish oil is 50% less absorbable than krill oil because fish oil's omega-3s are in triglyceride form while krill oils are in phospholipid form, which is the same format your cell walls are made of. That means krill oil gets into your cells immediately. In head-to-head studies, krill oil outperformed fish oil at improving cholesterol, reducing inflammation, and easing joint pain. Native Path Antarctic krill oil is sourced from pristine Antarctic waters, contains the powerful antioxidant astaxanthin, and comes in a tiny soft gel, no fishy burps. For my special bundle offer plus free shipping, head to getkrill.com/adapt. That's GETKRILL.com/ADAPT. Try it risk-free with a 365-day money-back guarantee. Click on that link in the description box below. If you believe there's such a thing, I'm just saying allegedly, there might be, maybe. A lot of research to show there is, a lot of research to show there isn't, that it's just random happenstance. But that money-making edge of things is going to continue. So you can't give total desperation totally to the planet for too long because people will just drop out and give up. Like they were testing that quite diligently during COVID to see what the reactions were with professional people, what the reactions were with, tradespeople, students, those that were going to retire. They pushed an entire, genre of people into early retirement to kind of open up some slots for the younger kids or whatever. But the money is still going to be there. And with this, I do believe that with this summer of love, there's going to be this back current of massive economic gains during this time for a select few if you're in the right assets. Not financial advice, but I can't see everything going to zero with all this crazy fear and everything around and all these events you're talking about and food prices going up and everything without somebody in the back making a tremendous amount of money off of this. And this is the time that all these fortunes are made, is when there's the most chaos. Like, go back through history. The more chaos there is, the more possibility for making money there is. Because that chaos causes the volatility of the up and down spikes. Like, Trump was that yesterday or day before said, oh, we got this big ass deal, war's off and everything. That's market manipulation, because you saw how quickly the stock market went up 3-4% just on that one couple tweets.
Exactly.
If you can't tell me that's not market manipulation, you have to give me a better definition of what is not, to show me what is not, because that is like in your face, up and center there. It can't be any more obvious now. And then the whole island, or the Shazan Island. I don't know if anybody has been watching the Shazan or Shazan, however, depending, off Albania there. That whole thing too, to try to control a strategic island coming into the Adriatic Sea from the Mediterranean under the guise of developing $1 billion top 1% vacation resort is kind of ridiculous too. The breakup with some of the most prime real estate and roots and resources on the planet, as Michael Young always likes to say. And those trade routes have been time immemorial. That Shazan Island is time immemorial as well. That has been held since Phoenician times to control, because it's 50 miles across. You can actually see across over to Italy. You can see literally ships with binoculars going across there. And with today's weaponry and technology, with radars beyond the binoculars, you could knock anything out going into the Adriatic Sea. Like the Venetians needed that as well. It was the most strategic point there. And there's nothing really on it except a bunch of bunkers, underground tunnels, 10 miles of tunnels, thousands of 3,000, 4,000 bunkers, and like a sliver of beach like this big. And they're like, oh, we walked barefoot up to the top of the hill. I'm calling bullshit right away. You guys would have been walking on overgrown trails. Nothing was maintained. There was no sand there anyway. It's rocky and corally. If you've ever been around like Croatia, it's almost like the Adriatic Sea was sculpted out of like a plasma discharge, like on planetary lightning size, where it's ripped out and you got the giant boulders right on the beach edge. And then as you go back further off the coast, the boulders, uniform in size, start to shrink and shrink all the way to Göbekli Tepe, where it's sand. And you got to wonder if that was an ionic wind event after the dispersion and the creation of the Adriatic Sea, if that wind didn't somehow blow and fill in part of Göbekli Tepe, because it was so perfectly, like when you go off the coast and you start looking at the debris size, perfect symmetry, perfect sizing, different strata, large boulders, medium boulders, small, but all in just layers as you go off the coast for hundreds of miles. And they're walking up there barefoot on these kind of like rocky thing. Nah, come on, it ridiculous, can't be. But that brings us all the way back over there into the Balkans. What's that? New Macedonia broke away, which was formerly part of Greece. I've been wanting to go to Bosnia anyway to go check out the pyramid. It's on my list for next year. Anybody wants to join? I'm trying to get together a Bosnian pyramid trip. Yeah, and go down in Dubrovnik down there, and we'll hit a few sites and some larger megalithic structures along. And in Albania, there's a couple, and Serbia right downtown also, there's a bunch down there too, star forts and megaliths. That whole area is super, super rich in history.
Somebody said, they were showing it with water down by El Paso. See, so the way the Rio Grande works is we get a lot of flood water, melt off water from the Rocky Mountains. That's when it's really strolling. However, sometimes it dries up, like here. It's dried up around Albuquerque. This is where most of the farming and stuff is. And this runs parallel to I-25 down to El Paso. Now, when you get down there, there's like a little trickle. Now, however, in Texas, they have storms. We have flash floods. So temporarily, you might see water in the river, but as a norm, it's going to be dry. So this is upriver from where you guys were talking about there in the chat. So the water's running out unless we get a really good monsoonal flow, which I think we might. And I think that's what these people are counting on as far as the data centers. And I think that they want, basically, we're going to get this weird combination of space data centers, ground data centers, and underwater data centers in the Arctic, Antarctic. And you got to question yourself, like, is this really just all for processing power? And I would agree that most of it is for computational power, because that's going to decide who runs the world in the near future, if not already. However, the countries of the world, including China and now Iran, have made comments that they're ready to start taking down satellites. Now, you remember a while back where we were kind of debating why it is that Elon Musk basically was putting up disposable satellites, 100 satellites, and then another one, they start to fall out of the sky, and they're easy to attack, right? And the reason for that is because they're so cheap to continually put up. And I have a feeling that they're planning on having little space wars over this idea of who gets to dominate space with computing power. And then I was looking at this too. You were talking about this, about the inflation. There's the excuse. These people that are in charge of things, and you alluded to it when you were talking about how the markets go up and down depending on what Trump's saying about what we're going to be doing. And he's, like 50 times he's gone, we got it, we don't got it, we got it, we don't got it, So each time someone can buy and sell, every time that happens, and make huge amounts of profits that no one even registers on. And then they're going to blame these war stoking, for inflation. But the truth is everything's running out. It already was in that. I believe that this is ongoing from pre-COVID. They already knew that the trends of less food, less packaging, less petroleum, and more restrictions on where and how and who can use the commerce system to trade. And then that's the same time that we started seeing these invisible fleets out there, nomad fleets with no transponders and no way to follow them, because they're doing the trade anyway, backdoor, and trying to get out of this. And then you got these billionaires, soon to be all trillionaires, fighting over basically who runs everything. And it looks like, in my opinion, they're just going to drop a big doo-doo on the Northern Hemisphere and restart this whole process in the Southern Hemisphere for decades to come. That's why you see every major tech company, oligarch, rich, billionaire, etc. They're all moving to locations in South America. And so many of these private islands that people are buying up. And like you were talking about a minute ago, there are even people negotiating, to buy big portions of countries to set up future strategic points. And that's basically what the whole Trump administration for this part has been doing. That's why you keep hearing rumors about Greenland, annexing Cuba, annexing Venezuela. It's just to keep everybody out there knowing that we are expanding, we're building new borders. But there's some kind of different system, and it doesn't seem to be the political system that's going to be running that. subsequent generations are just not learning how to do things. They're not learning trades. They're not picking up the skills that, maybe you or I just might have picked up on accident, just watching people growing up and stuff like that. They're just not getting those kind of experiences, especially children that live in the city. They're getting fed non-useful information in a real world where you have to eat and survive.
Yeah, because that's a North American monsoon. And I did a bunch of research on this over the years. There's a pattern that's a 4,000 year cycle pattern. And what you're talking about, a consistently wet period, is when the last time it was consistently wet enough for major cultures to exist there on runoff water that was consistently, where the river was full 24/7, 365, or never went into a dry period where it dried to that point, was pre-Anasazi. And that was the last time that North American monsoon had pushed that much water. But I do see sort of a shift there where it might be getting wetter, but it's not going to be turned on like next week. It's going to multi-decades for this thing. North American monsoon, anybody out there want to do your own research on that, check it out. I'll show you the flow maps coming off of the Baja Peninsula and how it's more the southern winds where they come now. They go over Northern California, and a lot of that stuff gets driven in Central California and Northern California. The North American monsoon, whatever pattern sets that up, the wind flow comes from below Baja and up into the Four Corners area, and that's the flow. So it dries out further north in Northern California, which would make sense how during the Ice Age there was that gap along the coast there. If there wasn't any precipitation coming down, and it was desert-ish up there in now British Columbia and further up into the Aleutians, because of that flow was locked in place, we're just getting a mini version of it outside of an Ice Age where that flow is really, really far south. You're talking 1,000 miles further south or even more than it exists right now. And that would continually push that moisture there as long as that, jet stream flow was locked in. But that's like a full change in the atmospheric flows. So everywhere on Earth would be different than it is now with dryness or wetness.
Think about this, for example, wrong button. In about 539 AD, you had the worst year ever. But over here in the Americas, it was wet. It was a wet period. So things were very good for the hunter-gatherers that lived in the area here for a pretty good period of time. But then all of a sudden, the Southwest Indians started building grain silos, building buildings, building cliff dwellings, all of these other things. And that happened because the weather changed dramatically. So we know all this other stuff was going on in China and South America and Europe, the Justinian period and all of that stuff. But over here in the Americas, they were doing fine as hunter-gatherers, as nomads. But something happened so severe that they started staying put, building cities, storing grain, storing corn, basically. And, you could tell that there was very hard times happening around that time, all the way up into the point where you have people from other empires coming up here, maybe trying to either conquer or find new lands and new resources. Right here in the Southwest, there's just eras of bone dry death and depression, followed by, monsoonal flooding and lakes and animals and luscious time. So I think that these guys know that there's cycles that you can mark out and map exactly. And I have a feeling that that's what we're seeing when we're seeing the transfer of investment and the building of new infrastructure in all of these places. It's more located, I would say, below the 40th, not the 33rd, but the 40th. It's all below that.
What was the onset period for what you just described? Before the populace was aware. I mean, if they're hunter-gatherers, obviously everybody in unison is going to be aware. But today we're so stratified in terms of society. Like the farmers would be aware first, and those that are in the weather and that sort of thing, precipitation. They would get it second. Grain traders. But you got to wonder, like, when and how fast would that happen to affect enough people? What do you think that 10 years, 20 years, less, more?
I think it's been probably. Well, judging by the era, let's say 539, they think that they started Chaco Canyon probably around 600 AD. So that's less 50, 60 years right there that they were so scared that they decided to start saving grain and changing their entire lifestyle.
That's about where we are on that same timeline, isn't it? From what we would first started talking about this climate debate about 40 years ago. Like I'd had a really interesting conversation with some people through my years doing this, asking something on the similar line. Okay, all this money that's devoted to the research, is it really for what it is said it is for, or is it to catalog, track and trace every single of these cycles across the planet in every location? And then now that we have AI to crunch all that data to get specific feeds of specific areas so they would know which areas would be unrest first because of food production. And that was really what it was, under the guise of something else. Because you can't allot trillions of dollars into something for research, and then people are like, wow, you're doing so much research on the climate. Like, that's crazy. Why do you guys want to? Oh, but if you frame it in a different way, like we must, because it's an existential threat. There were like 10,000 peer-reviewed papers on just the North American monsoon on that 4,000-year cycle.
Well, think about, what you're just saying there, where they take this idea of something and then really they're doing something else. I mean, a good example of that is the 60-year space program that never went anywhere because it really wasn't about that. It was about Cold War. It was about the whole expansion of the military state. It had nothing to do with going into space other than dominating it militarily, or we wouldn't even have built any of the stuff that they were showing the public.
Yeah, some of these movies, that movie Geostorm, not a very good movie. There are a couple action scenes in it of destruction, which I'm always a fan of, that big like destruction stuff on Earth. But the Geostorm, the way those satellites in orbit were actually physically connected together to make a physical cage around the Earth, versus in our mind, what they're trying to sell us is they're all independently floating and orbiting up there. Now, so what if SpaceX puts all these data centers in space, they're going to have radio signal between them uninterrupted and then beam down to the planet. What we're being shown in popular movies is really the truth. You tell me, are we going to create an actual literal physical grid where those data center boxes that are going to be floating in orbit, are those all going to actually be physically connected into larger and larger and larger Lego pieces? You're going to get something that's, an eighth of the size of the Earth, or, with the solar panels up there blocking. So it'll be a continuous eclipse going around the planet every single day as this thing rotates. Like you can see the International Space Agency move around the planet every hour and a half, like where it's going to be. Imagine if something was a 16th of the size of the planet in orbit with solar panels blocking a 16th of that, and you would know where it would move around every day, and you could watch the eclipse come and go.
They're trying to sell an app right now where you could push a button and it reflects sunlight to you in the night side. They're trying to set up cities that have reflective sunlight on them all night so that they can continue to do stuff. So we're moving out there, and it's kind of like I'm going to give Greg Allison a little credit here. He has what he calls the dark fortress theory, not the dark forest, but fortress, which is that aliens, and probably humans, if we really wanted to occupy space, we're not going to be putting up space stations floating in space. We're going to be digging out and putting technology into rock to protect it. Basically, the idea that everybody was worried about with the Oumuamua and Atlas is that, it was some kind of asteroid or structure that had technology in it. But that's exactly what we're about to do. So when we're talking about in the near future going to war in space and knocking out satellites, making junk trails that destroy all of the other satellites, we know that just probably one explosion strategically placed in orbit, in the orbit of the satellites that we use for utility, for telephone communications, for internet and other things, even government relaying of information, they can all be knocked out literally within a period of probably 24 to 36 hours from a domino effect of trashing a whole layer of orbit with space debris. Now, if you push it back out a little bit, or maybe one of our missions pull in a rock, or maybe, there's a rock trailing Earth on the same orbit. It's been there forever. Say you had a big data center there with a bunch of equipment that was totally watching Earth, trailing it nonstop. Do exactly what you're talking about. It's a cage, invisible bars around the planet. The ones down on the ground, they're not really, I don't think, for computing power. It's exactly what you said, tracking and tracing.
Yeah, and we'll continue with the tokenization aspect, because these data centers are not just about tracking and tracing you and running a flock camera. They're about the tokenization of all assets on the planet in a digitized format of literally everything on the planet all the way down to my remote control here, because there's value in that with the plastic and the component parts that could be recycled. So this will go on the blockchain as well as a digitized item, but you're going to have to run that in real time. So that's really more what the data centers are about. They're feeding you one thing and reasoning. You got to think, with all that digital credit score and track and trace and everything China does, they're doing it with about, let's just round it up and say 500 data centers. And that's for China's behemoth track and trace camera, 1,000 million billion credit scores, instantaneous camera and everything to track everything in real time, everything. That's China, 500. We're going to build 3,500 just in America. All right, so that tells me that we're still trying to retain and control something far greater than just knowing where you're driving your car, what you're posting on social media. It's really about the tokenization and digitization of all things on the planet in real time. And that would include natural forests, fisheries, as well as stocks and bonds and the price movements of everything as it moves down. Your wages, everything will have a tokenized value on it. Like, there'll be nothing on this planet that won't have value associated with it, because that way they can create an entirely new money supply backed by something physical. Now, this SpaceX IPO validates that we have gotten just one gigantic step closer to this rollout of the system of the tokenization, because I think it's in 3 days, the DTCC, which is the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation in America that runs pretty much all stocks, bonds, is going live with their testing of all tokenized securities. Anything in Wall Street that you can find in Wall Street, or anything that you saw in Yahoo Finance, stocks, bonds, ETFs, 401ks, retirement trusts, anything like this is all going to be tokenized through the DTCC, running and using stellar lumens. Even just the very announcement that they might partner drove stellar lumens from like 8 cents to 25 cents in a couple days. They're not even using it yet. The thing is, every time that let's say you're an issuer of a stock, when you want to issue the stock, you're going to have to lock up 25 tokens to create an individual contract for that stock, and then you're going to put it out. So right now, what are there, like 30,000 different offerings out on Wall Street, including ETFs and all these things? So each one of those are going to have 25 XRP locked in there indefinitely, as long as you're going to issue something on that. So the utilization's real for it, and the fees will be paid using Stellar. And the reason they like Stellar, because it settles pretty much instantly, and there's no carryover on that. And I will say another thing for the XRP army lovers out there. You got to take a breath of reality here for a second. If I am a company or a country and I'm going to move, let's say, $500 billion, am I going to put it into XRP tokens that can move in price over the 5 minutes or 10 minutes until I get, or an hour or however long it takes? Or am I just going to lock that in RLUSD, where it's a stablecoin token on the Ripple network, where nothing will lose value? It'll still be $1 when it arrives at my destination. So these people that think they're all going to run on XRP, no, these massive transactions are going to be on RLUSD, the stablecoin issued by the Ripple and used in the Ripple network and on-demand liquidity ecosystem. You got to be insane if you think these companies are going to try to take that risk on turning it into XRP, traded on an open market, which should go up or down, and then they're going to try to move that much. No, nobody's going to do that. They're all going to be using these things that remain stable. Now, the settlement, Stellar Lumens, that is going to be for the payment of most things. That'll be wrapped into their stable tokens or their contracts, which these tokens, one for one, the banks are issuing their own $1 to $1, like a JP Morgan dollar. That transaction between the houses running on the fees will be Stellar Lumens. They're not going to convert it into Stellar and move it over. That's the whole reason all this legislation's coming up with the Clarity Act about stable coins specifically. Because when these companies want to move hundreds of billions, they're going to put it into a stable coin of whatever issuance from a government, a company, a city, or whatever, and then they're going to move it. These tokens will be used for fees and that sort of thing. I agree. And then we got Elon blowing all this stuff up into space right now, where these data centers now are going to reside above us. So this is just the next step to know that this tokenization aspect is moving. I wonder how long it'll take them to get all the data centers up and functional in orbit. And when they do, how long before, because the DTCC is going live along with the Bank for International Settlements, and all central banks on the planet are going live in October of this year. They're starting the testing right now. And they have all these regional hubs. And America, is, for example, is its own one region. And then that will feed into then the Bank for International Settlements, and they have their own token layers. So nothing's going to be running on what you consider cryptocurrency. It's all going to be tokenized accounts on stable coins. That's the reason they need the Clarity Act. So with Elon launching that up, I think the Clarity Act's coming out pretty quick to be solidified and done with, because I think these two are marching hand in hand together. They need to have a place to store the data, but they need the laws to be able to enable the data to be able to store it somewhere. Like, you can't have both. And I see that comment there. Can they tokenize your property if you own it? That is an unknown. And I saw something about trusts earlier as well. These are unknowns. This is what they're trying to get in this Clarity Act, because you as an individual are still a citizen of a country. You really own nothing unless you can get the original deed to that property back in the early 1800s. You still pay property tax. You are a renter. You're listed as a renter on your property. Even though you own it full out, you are still a vassal of the state, including the United States. You never own anything unless you can get the original property deed issued back. Like I say, most of these property deeds were, say, 1790s to early 1830s. If you can trace it back and get that original deed, that's outside of this system and it can't be included. That's all I know about that. Thanks for joining. I hope you got something out of the video. Please support us. buymeacoffee.com/civilization cycle if you like information like this. That link's in the description box below. If you're excited to start your garden this year with real, authentic, heirloom and organic seeds, to check out trueleafmarket.com. You won't regret it. Happy planting, and thank you for supporting the channel and this broadcast. Click the link in the description box below. And if you would like to be a guest on the Civilization Cycle podcast, or would like to suggest a guest to join us here on the Civilization Cycle podcast, send us a message at civilizationcyclepodcast@protonmail.com. And visit us at civilizationcycle.com to sign up for the weekly show notes for the live show every Thursday night, 10 p.m. to midnight. 10 bullet points so you can keep the conversation going with others, and keywords so you can do some of your own research. civilizationcycle.com. We'll see you next show. Bye for now.